Right now, you're surrounded by the results of one of the strangest ideas humanity ever had. Your phone, the clothes you're wearing, the food in your kitchen, the road outside your window. Every single one of those things exists because millions of people who have never met each other, who speak different languages, who live on opposite sides of the planet, somehow agreed to cooperate. And the thing that made that cooperation possible is something you probably haven't thought about since the last time you checked your bank balance. Money. Not the paper, not the coins, the idea. The shared agreement that a specific object or number represents value. That agreement is so deeply woven into the way civilization works that most people never stop to question it. But here's the question worth asking. What if that agreement never happened? What if, somewhere along the line, humanity simply never invented money at all? Because the answer isn't what most people expect. And it changes everything you think you know about how the modern world actually got built. Let's go back to where the story starts. About 10,000 years ago, when humans were just beginning to settle into permanent communities, the economy ran on something called barter. You have something I need. I have something you need. We trade. Simple in theory, deeply frustrating in practice. Because for barter to work, both people need to want exactly what the other has, at exactly the same moment. Economists call this the double coincidence of wants. And the problem is that it almost never happens cleanly. Imagine you're a farmer in 8000 BC. You've grown more grain than you can eat. You need new sandals. You find the sandal maker. But the sandal maker doesn't want grain. He wants meat. So now you need to find a hunter. The hunter wants help repairing his roof. The roofer wants grain, but only the kind you don't have. One simple transaction has become a chain of dependencies so complicated it could take days to resolve. And that's just sandals. The ancient Sumerians in Mesopotamia were among the first to find a way around it. Around 3000 BC, they began using clay tablets to record debts and obligations. Grain stored in temple warehouses was tracked and traded symbolically. It wasn't coins yet, but it was the earliest recognizable ancestor of money. The idea that value could be represented, stored, and transferred without physically exchanging goods. In our alternate timeline, that idea never arrives. And here's where it gets interesting. Because a world without money isn't just a world without wallets. It's a world where the entire architecture of human cooperation gets rebuilt from scratch. Cities still form. Humans are social animals, and we cluster together regardless. But the cities stay small, because the larger a community gets, the more it depends on strangers cooperating efficiently. A village of 200 people can run on reputation and reciprocity. Everyone knows everyone. You help me today, I help you next harvest. But a city of 50,000 strangers cannot function on personal trust alone. It needs a system, and without money, that system is extraordinarily hard to build. Think about what you do for work. Maybe you write code. Maybe you teach. Maybe you design buildings or diagnose illness or drive a truck. None of those jobs produce food. None of them produce shelter. In a moneyless world, the question of how a surgeon gets fed becomes genuinely complicated. Does the hospital grow its own crops? Does the surgeon personally negotiate with every farmer in the region for every meal? The answer ancient societies found was communal allocation. The community collectively decides who gets what based on their contribution. And that works at small scale. It breaks down completely at the scale of a modern city, where a single hospital employs hundreds of specialists whose skills took decades to develop. Specialization is the engine of human progress. The reason you have antibiotics and aircraft and smartphones is because different people spent their entire lives mastering narrow, deep skills and then exchanged the products of those skills with each other. Money is what makes that exchange possible at scale. Without it, the incentive to specialize weakens dramatically. Why spend 10 years becoming a neurosurgeon if the community might simply decide your contribution isn't worth the resources it requires? And for a moment, sit with that. Because there's something quietly unsettling about it. We talk about money as though it's the source of humanity's problems. The thing that creates inequality, drives greed, corrupts good people. And those criticisms aren't wrong. But underneath all of it, money is doing something that almost nothing else can do. It's allowing a farmer in Iowa and an engineer in Seoul and a truck driver in Brazil to participate in the same system of exchange without ever speaking to each other, without ever needing to trust each other personally. That's not nothing. That's extraordinary. The assumption most people make about a moneyless world is that it would be more equal. No billionaires, no poverty, no one sleeping on the street while someone else owns a yacht. But human nature doesn't get redesigned when you remove currency. The drive to accumulate resources, to hold power, to secure advantages for yourself and your family, that drive predates money by hundreds of thousands of years. Archaeologists excavating sites from long before the first coins were minted have found clear evidence of social hierarchy: larger dwelling, better burial goods, preferential access to food, people at the top of the social structure and people at the bottom. Inequality didn't arrive with money. Money just gave inequality a new language to speak in. What would replace it? History offers a few answers, and none of them are particularly comforting. Societies without formal currency have historically organized around land, labor, and military force. The people who control the most territory hold the most power. The people who can command the most labor, through birth, through violence, through religious authority, determine how resources get distributed. The medieval feudal system is roughly what a large-scale moneyless civilization tends to look like. A small number of people at the top controlling everything below them, not through the abstract mechanism of wealth, but through direct physical control of land and people. Here's the part that tends to surprise people. The most important thing money ever did wasn't make trade easier. It was make trust transferable between strangers. Before money, the circle of people you could reliably cooperate with was limited to the people you personally knew: your village, your tribe, your family. Money extended that circle to include anyone, anywhere who operated within the same system. A Roman merchant could do business in Egypt because both parties understood the value of the coins exchanged between them. A medieval trader could move goods across 3 kingdoms because the gold he carried meant the same thing in each one. Money is, at its core, a technology for extending cooperation beyond the limits of personal relationship. Without that technology, the world contracts. Not catastrophically, not overnight, but gradually, generation by generation, the radius of human cooperation shrinks back toward the local. The global supply chains that produce your phone, materials mined in Congo, processed in China, assembled in Vietnam, shipped through Singapore, delivered to your door, those chains require thousands of strangers to agree on the value of their contributions at every step. Remove the universal language of money, and those chains don't just get complicated, they become essentially impossible to coordinate. That shaman who first scratched a debt record into a clay tablet in ancient Sumer didn't know what he was starting. He was just trying to remember who owed what to whom. But that small act, the decision to represent value symbolically rather than physically, set in motion a chain of consequences that eventually produced every economic system that has ever existed. Every bank, every stock market, every salary, every price tag on every product in every store in every city on Earth. You use money every day without thinking about it. Most of the time it's invisible. A tap of a card, a transfer on a screen, a number going up or down in an app. But underneath that invisibility, it's doing something ancient and essential. It's telling a stranger that your time, your skill, your effort has a value they can understand. And it's telling you the same thing about theirs. The world without money isn't a utopia of shared resources and equal community. It's a much smaller world, a much slower world. A world where the ceiling of human cooperation sits somewhere around a few thousand people who know each other personally, rather than 8 billion strangers building things together that none of them could have built alone. Money didn't make us better, but it made us bigger. And in the end, bigger is the reason you're watching this on a device that would look like pure magic to every human being who ever lived before the last 200 years.